welcome to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. I am your host, Matthew Loomis. Here on the Blog Chronicles podcast, we talk with world-renowned bloggers living their dreams and mid-tier bloggers chasing their dreams. What we do is we dive deep into the guest's personal story and or talk about their expertise and find out the things that they know that can help bloggers like you be more successful. Before we begin, let me point out that the Blog Chronicles is sponsored by BuildYourOwnBlog.net, the full-service destination for people who want to start their own WordPress blog and achieve long-term success. Visit BuildYourOwnBlog.net to start your new blog today. All right, so who is going to be our guest today? Today we're going to talk with a blogger, podcaster, and copywriter named Nathan Fraser. Nathan currently runs two successful podcasts. One is called The Nathan Fraser Show, where he's the host, and he talks about topics related to digital marketing, working for yourself, entrepreneurism, things like that. And on his other show, it's called The Copywriter's Podcast with David Garfinkel, where Nathan interviews Garfinkel about tips and strategies to using copywriting for business and marketing purposes. Nathan also owns a podcast hosting business called Podcast Blastoff, where you can host your podcast, and it even includes a personalized website for your show. I've known Nathan for a few years now, primarily through Facebook, where we originally connected. Nathan is outspoken on his political views on Facebook. He makes compelling posts on Facebook, and that is what initially got my attention and made me want to connect with Nathan. He interviewed me a couple of years ago, and I interviewed him several months ago, and now finally this interview is ready to be published. Wait till you hear what Nathan thinks about podcasting as a tool for bloggers to help promote themselves, get traffic, and most importantly, how you can know if podcasting is right for you or not. To be honest, podcasting is not easy. It's really fun if you enjoy it, and it might be a good fit for you, but before you put the time, money, and effort into it, you should listen to what Nathan has to say. Because today I'm going to ask him what type of person is best suited for podcasting. So this episode could save you some time and money. All right, pull up a chair and let's have a chat with blogger, marketer, and podcaster Nathan Fraser. Hi, Nathan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Matthew? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on the Blog Chronicles today, where we talk with world-famous bloggers and mid-tier bloggers chasing their dreams. Now, the first half of the show is called What's Your Story?, where we chronicle your personal online journey. And I'd like to start with some questions about who you are and your journey up to this point. Now, Nathan, I know you've been a prolific podcaster for several years now, and we'll get into that in a moment, but I want to start by asking you if you consider yourself a blogger. Do you ever write blog content?
Yeah, I do. On one of my websites, I run two of my websites, and specifically, I got into blogging mainly for content creation. I love podcasting, but podcast SEO is not the best. So blogging is kind of the tool that I use to fill in that hole in my content creation.
Okay. How many sites do you own right now?
I own probably upwards of 10 websites that are up and active, and then I'm probably squatting on another 15 or 20 URLs.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious because, I'm not real familiar with your written content. I am very familiar with your podcasting and some of your YouTube stuff, but not the written stuff. Do you enjoy writing?
I love writing. Actually, I enjoy writing more than podcasting, but
really
most of my writing though is email rather as opposed to blog posts.
Right. Yeah. You've got a nice, a really good email newsletter. So what was your very first blog?
My very first blog was actually guest posting on other people's blogs, and it was back in, maybe like the late 2000s, 2007, 2008. And it was when I first started doing podcasting and people would ask me to come on and write articles for their blogs. That's kind of how I got into it. As far as my own blogging, It wasn't until I started Podcast Blast Off that I actually started blogging. And again, that was mainly because we needed some content to help push us up in relevance for search engines.
Now, you were once a political activist. I think that you no longer consider yourself one. Is that right?
um, I I think everybody is a political activist to a certain degree. Everybody has their things that they're passionate about.
Hmm.
I am very apathetic, though. I think I still hold a lot of. I believe in personal liberty. I believe in individual freedom, and I don't like it when I see people from any political party trampling on the rights of any other person. And so, I mean, I still hold those beliefs. I'm not as vocal about them now, and we can probably get into why. But it's not the focal point of my energy anymore.
Yeah. Maybe we should kind of get into the why because I think that's going to help flesh out your blogging journey. So, did you start out as a political blogger? And tell us how that time in your life when you were very politically active, how did that bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I absolutely did start out as a political blogger, and it was it was mainly, I guess, what kind of led me to where I am today is through writing blogs and through testing and seeing what kind of engagement I would get, through seeing which kind of headlines would pull more readers, seeing which kind of writing styles would keep people reading to the end rather than bouncing back. And all that stuff kind of led to where I am now. Originally, though, I got into blogging in general. The reason why is because I just felt that mainstream media was not doing a very good job of accurately portraying the wide variety of views that are out there. We get side A of the story and side B of the story, and there's a whole alphabet of other points of view that are just completely ignored
Mhm.
or like kind of shoehorned into, left or right. And I never really was a big fan of either of those positions exclusively. I kind of feel like the right is right on certain things and wrong on others. Same thing with the left. And I didn't think that there was enough people out there expressing the variety of opinions that I was hearing from other people. And so I kind of got into blogging as a way to create the media that I felt was lacking coming from the mainstream authority figures in media.
And how long were you a political blogger?
Oh gosh. Like I said, I guess originally, before I even knew what blogging was, I was writing articles, I was creating websites, but I wasn't doing it with like an RSS feed. I was just creating websites and putting my rants on them.
Mm.
That was probably back in maybe 2002. Officially started guest writing for other blogs about 2007, 2008, and was still writing a lot of political stuff, I would say all the way up until about 2012, 2013. We had some uh, really tragic things happen in our family. My little brother passed away, and me and him were staunch political activists together. And his passing kind of took a lot of the wind out of me. But I don't think that that's the reason why I slowed down, but it was a contributing factor. But a good 10 years, I was very actively writing political content under pseudonyms most of the time, not under my name that I write now, which is my real name.
Oh, okay. So we can't really go back and try to find a lot of that stuff.
If you're good enough, if you've got good enough internet skills, you probably can find all of it. But I definitely did a good job of hiding my identity for the first 8 years of my internet blogging existence.
Okay. kind of had like anonymous type blogs and pen names and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot more people, now that I've kind of gotten into the community and I know a lot of bloggers, I think a lot more people actually do that. Maybe not for the same reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but I've met a lot of people that use pen names for their blogs. And I think it's probably a lot more common than most people realize.
I agree. I have found that through Build Your Own Blog that it is happening more than you realize.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, a post that I have called How to Create an Anonymous Blog is a really strong evergreen post that continues to get traffic, or, organic traffic. So, yeah, it's definitely something that people are interested in out there. So what made you, because when I did a search on you on YouTube, I found mostly political stuff. What made you kind of leave that whole life and kind of focus more on your own business, like marketing and copywriting and stuff like that?
It was kind of a collection of things. Number one, for a long time, and this is going to sound really crazy to some of the listeners, but I was a courtroom activist. I would go into courtrooms and I would kind of expose what was going on in different traffic citations and different types of criminal procedures. And I would go in there and I would get the recordings of cases getting dismissed. I'd get the paperwork of cases that we were getting dismissed. And the court system, while I think that a lot of people inside of the court system are there because they think they're doing a good job, there's a lot of illegal stuff that goes on in the legal process. And so for a good number of years, that was what my activism was going into courtrooms, taking on court cases, my own, and a lot of people that would call me up and ask me how I was getting my cases dismissed. And we would go into the courtrooms and we would point out different parts of the law that the courts were violating. And very frequently we were getting our cases dismissed because of this. It got to the point, though, that there's a lot of really bad legal theory on the internet. There's a lot of internet lawyers, jailhouse lawyers that spread a lot of bad information. And it got to the point where I was spending hours and hours of my life each week on the phone with people or walking through what I would do in my court cases with people. And they would take up a lot of my time. And then they'd go into court and they'd try some sovereign citizen stuff, or they'd try some cess decay trust stuff. These are legal theories that are out there that I don't subscribe to. But they would go into court and they would try things completely foreign to what I was doing. And then they would get mad at me and ask me how come it didn't work. And it got to the point where I was spending, like I said, 3-4 hours a night sometimes with people on the phone, walking them through what I would do when I went to court, and then not have it all fall on deaf ears. And then I started, after a while, people started coming to me with criminal cases that I didn't agree should be dismissed, people that were getting busted actually harming property, actually harming people, getting caught shoplifting, damaging people's property, that I wasn't, the things that I would teach would be able to get people off of these kind of criminal cases, but I wasn't comfortable helping people in that. And I kept getting more and more people that were like, well, I got busted shoplifting, or my girlfriend's mad at me because I beat her up and the court's coming after me for domestic violence, or I don't want to pay my child support. And I just kept attracting, the content that you put out will attract people. And that's one of the things that blogging you need to be very conscious of, is who am I going to attract with this content? And I was attracting the wrong people with my political stuff. And as much as I still believe in freedom, as much as I still believe that the legal system should follow their own laws, I just can't create content for that audience because it was attracting the wrong type of people. And that's the biggest reason why I moved away from it.
Wow, that's fascinating. And it sounds like we could do a whole show just on that.
Yes, but I don't want to attract those type of people.
Right. And this is the Blog Chronicles. So let's so you decided to leave that and then go on to running your own business, becoming more like an entrepreneur, or would you call yourself a freelancer? Did you start out as a freelancer and then you've always been an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, at that point, I'd already owned a couple of maybe under the table businesses. Me and my brother had started a record label. I had a t-shirt factor or a t-shirt printing business, and I was also doing a lot of graphic design, web design, doing album covers for record labels, doing t-shirt designs for different businesses, doing logo work for businesses. So I've always been either a full-on entrepreneur or a side hustle entrepreneur. But I never really took it seriously because the biggest thing was my activism. And then, like I said, my brother passed away in 2012, so the record label kind of died with him. And at that time, I don't know if you've ever had anybody really close to you pass, but it leaves you exhausted afterwards. And for about a year afterwards, I couldn't take on other people's court cases. I couldn't deal with all of the bickering and infighting inside of the political realm. And I said, this was my brother's thing. I really did this for him. This was what he believed. It's what I believed as well. But at that point, I just said, I need to focus on what I really love. And what I really love is building businesses and serving people in the free market. And so I kind of pivoted at that point and started putting more of my focus into the businesses that I was trying to get off the ground. And most of them have fallen by the wayside, and two of them have remained. And those are the two that I put most of my energy into now.
Right. And one of those is Podcast Blast Off, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But let's go ahead and get into podcasting a little bit with your story. So when did you then really get focused on podcasting, and why have you fallen in love with the medium of podcasting?
Oh, man. Well, we've got to keep this to under an hour.
But, right.
I always wanted to be a radio DJ when I was a kid. I don't know if you remember that movie, Pump Up the Volume. I think it was with Christian Slater. Do you remember that movie?
Yes, I do. Uh-huh.
Okay. Ever since that movie, I was like, I need to do pirate radio. I wanted to do, and I had experience I've been interviewed on Fox News and on Fox News Radio, and I've been interviewed multiple times on local radio stations as well. And I always loved being behind the microphone, spent years of my life inside of the studio recording albums. So I just love being behind a mic. And when podcasting started, it started popping off, I think, like mid-2000s. By the time I got into it, it was about 2008. And one of my buddies that had interviewed me and my brother, he wanted us to come on and do a show with him. And so I started doing a weekly podcast with him, and never turned back since then. I fell in love with the medium. I love the fact that you can find a podcast on anything. If you want to learn about how to train your dog, you can find a podcast. If you want to learn how to do social media, you can find a podcast. You want to learn how to do a better blog, you can find a podcast for it. Mm-hmm. And it fills such a void in the marketplace. And you don't have to sit at your computer and read it. You don't have to sit at your computer and watch it like a YouTube video. You can download everything, and it doesn't eat up all the data on your phone. You can listen to podcasts while you're walking your dog or doing your exercise routine or washing the dishes. Just to me, it's just the perfect form of media. But that's my personal bias because I have a business that caters towards podcasters probably.
You really are good at podcasting, and you are somebody that I learned from when it comes to podcasting, and I'm still learning myself. So let's get into podcasting a little more here. Let's now get into the show that we call What Can You Teach Us? So Nathan, podcasting can really look like a lot of fun from the outside, and it is fun for many people, but it's not necessarily for everybody. I think you would agree that every blogger doesn't necessarily need a podcast, or the podcast might not benefit certain types of online businesses or specific people. So let's talk about who should start a podcast and who should not. Can you give us your take on how you see this?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. I think that if you're a really good writer, blogging is perfect for you. And if we kind of touched on it earlier, blogging is great for SEO. If you're a charismatic speaker, though, if you love talking with people, if you love sharing your ideas with people, if you feel comfortable talking, if you feel comfortable getting in front of a room and talking, or getting around a table with close friends and talking, podcasting probably is right for you. It's more about, though, you have to be entertaining. You have to be able to hold a conversation. You have to be able to provide some sort of reason for people to listen. With a blog post, you can sit there and you can rewrite it. You can take a week to work on it and kind of flesh everything out and skeletonize it and then flesh it out. With a podcast, you can enter it with your show notes, but if you just read straight off of your show notes, it's going to sound very inauthentic, and it's not going to. People like podcasting because it's got that grit. It's gritty, not pretty. It's textured, not polished. And if you can get on the mic and you can entertain people, educate people, inspire people, inform people, and do it in a way where you feel comfortable talking to people, then podcasting is perfect for you. I like it personally because I'm not very pretty, so YouTube and Facebook video, live video, they don't work very well for me. And blogging and podcasting are my two favorite forms of media, and Facebook status updates. But as far as actually generating business and driving traffic, podcasting and blogging are my two absolute favorite forms of media.
So monetization is one reason why you think somebody should consider podcasting. What other benefits are there to podcasting?
Well, first, before we skip right over that, monetization is something that I think, if first and foremost, if you're doing a good job of serving your audience, you'll find out how you can monetize your podcast. I don't think anybody should get into podcasting with the intent of making money, though, because I wouldn't say it's a flooded market, but there's definitely a lot of competition in the market, and it's not as easy to make money off of a podcast. I think if your first objective with a podcast is to serve your listeners, you'll find ways to monetize it. But if your first objective is to monetize it, you're never going to find ways to get new listeners.
Okay, so I think that's a key nugget there from you, that you're saying that people shouldn't go into a podcast with the intent of monetizing it?
I think that it's something you should consider. You should definitely think to yourself, how am I going to monetize this? Because podcasting can be expensive. There's studio equipment, there's hosting services, there's a lot of time and frustration trying to get guests booked and having software crashes in the middle of a recording. There's a lot that goes into podcasting. And if you want to make some sort of money or recompensate yourself some sort of way off of it, it's definitely something that should be a consideration. I just don't think it should be the first priority. And I think that a lot of people that get into podcasting for that reason, thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to make money off of this, they're the people that get 7 episodes in, haven't been able to turn a dime off of their podcast, and end up quitting before they're ever able to get traction. It's the people that go into it because they're passionate about it. It's the people that go into it because they want to be part of a conversation. They want to be part of a community. They want to serve their listeners. Those are the people that stick with it long enough to actually figure out how to monetize it, but it doesn't happen overnight.
For me, I also like how it gives me an opportunity to sit down and meet face to face with, some pretty big names out there in the field. It gives me an opportunity to talk to CEOs and people that otherwise it's very hard to get some time with them. Do you find that to be another good reason to maybe start podcasting?
Oh, yeah. In my own personal podcast, I'm a copywriter, and I have been able to meet people that would be completely outside of my reach without having a podcast. I've been able to connect with people that charge thousands of dollars per hour to talk with them, and they freely give me their time because I've got a podcast. I just helped David Garfinkel. I don't know if anybody listening would know who he is, but he's a really prolific copywriter. He writes advertisements for some of the most successful business magazines in the world. And this guy is like exclusive. He's very, very hard to get in contact with. And and he's one of my personal heroes. I've learned so much from him. And because I had a podcast, I was able to reach out to him and say, hey, I'd love to have you on. And because that turned into a good experience for him, we were able to start a project. So now I have a second podcast that I do with him, and I would have never been, and it leads to business opportunities, but the networking and the connection and being able to meet people that, it's like, it's the new version of buying somebody lunch and being able to sit down and pick their brain. But instead of just a $30 lunch, you get to provide immense value because now you're introducing your audience to them and you're helping them grow their name. And you rather than just putting some food in their belly, you're actually helping them expand their audience.
Right.
So podcasting is just amazing for growing your own personal network.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It is like buying them lunch, except they're also getting a lot of benefit from it as well. Not just helping you personally, but they're also reaching new people, with their message too. The Copywriters podcast that you're talking about with David Garfinkel, that is a really good podcast. I really enjoy that.
I love, and that's the other kind of hidden benefit is I get to meet and have conversations and learn from people that I wouldn't be able to. So doing the Copywriters podcast with David, it's like a personal mentorship that he actually pays me for. So it's kind of amazing.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Yeah, you had John Carlton on the other day.
Uh-huh.
Right. He's also considered an A-list copywriter, a rock star in the copywriting field, so to speak.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, again, I know this is a podcast about blogging, and I don't want to focus too much on podcasting, but I just love it. I don't know. Let me ask you a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Getting guest blog posts or getting like collaboration from other top name bloggers or people, thought leaders in a particular field. What's your experience been trying to work with somebody on a blog post versus trying to get somebody and do a collaboration on a podcast episode?
Well, I found that when it comes to getting a guest post versus getting someone to come on the show and talk with me, I found it to be, I would say, definitely easier to have them on the podcast, which is why I said that earlier about how this gives me an opportunity to meet people and talk to them face to face. Whereas with a guest post, it's usually done through email and you're not actually talking to the person. And you can actually go through that whole process and your guest post is published and it goes well and everything, but you've never actually talked to the person. So I think that definitely when it comes to relationship building, podcasting is a really great way to go if you want to connect with quote unquote influencers. That's my take on it.
Okay. That's kind of my take too. I think that podcasting has its strengths and blogging has its strengths, but that's kind of been and that's how we met too, is I invited you to come on my podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I can't remember how we met before that. I don't know. Did we connect on Facebook?
Probably. Facebook.
The bane of our existence, right? No, it's got its good points. But Nathan, what are the benefits? Well, we already talked about the benefits. What are the challenges, or what's the biggest challenge that you find to podcasting? And before you go into that, I think you brought up the point about we don't want to talk too much about podcasting. The reason why we're talking about this today is because podcasting is a form of blogging content. So It's definitely something that a blogger out there should think about and consider. So go ahead.
To kind of add on to that too, podcasting is kind of like an outreach of blogging. The RSS feed comes from the blog. The weekly reverse chronological ordered content comes from the blog. So it's kind of just like maybe a blog plus an audio feature added into it. Mm-hmm. So the two definitely have kind of a lot of overlap and synchronicity. I think the hardest part for me about podcasting, there's two. Trying to get interviews with people and make your schedules match up is always very difficult. And coming up with new content every week and not feeling like you're beating a dead horse. And I'm assuming, because I struggled with this in writing as well, I'm assuming that that's not exclusive to podcasting.
No, it's not. No, that can be a challenge at times, even if you're just writing. I would say that can be a struggle at times. It's funny you mentioned that, though, because when it comes to podcasting, I like to take it on an individual basis when it comes to coming up with questions, and I like to research the guests and really get to know them. If we are going to talk about their book, I actually like to read the book. But I know, for example, I won't mention who it is, but I know a podcaster who basically, and he's got a really successful show. I don't know him personally, but I know that his show is very successful. And what he does is he has like a web page on his site where all of the questions are there for the guests to see. And basically, he's got a template of questions that he uses every week. And then, but of course, there's going to be little nuances here and there, follow-ups that are spontaneous and original. But he has this template of the same questions. And I'm curious with your experience, do you think that's a good way to go, or do you think it should be on an individual basis, guest basis, when it comes to coming up with new material and questions?
The way you're doing it is the more difficult way to do it, but for longevity and for longer listener lifetime, you're doing it the right way. I know that there's a couple of podcasts out there. There's one that is like one of the most viral, on fire entrepreneurial podcasts out there. And that's the format for that one. It's the same questions. It's what was your aha moment, and what was the biggest thing what's your morning routine look? And
right.
I mean, how many times can you hear the same answers? How many times can you ask the same questions before you just get burnt out?
Right.
And when I did my first podcast, it was a music podcast, and we would interview different political musicians. And that's how we did it. We asked them, how did you get into music? Why did you decide to start doing political music? How do you feel about this particular current issue? Right. And that was like the same 3 questions every time. And it just got so boring. And after maybe 13 or 14 episodes, I just didn't want to do that podcast anymore. But when you do it your way, where it's like, okay, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of research about this person. I'm going to find out what it is that they like to talk about. And we're going to just have a spontaneous, we might have a little bit of, this is some of the points I'd like to hit, and this is kind of like where I'd like to go. But we're just going to jump on, hit record. I'll ask a couple of questions. That might lead to some other questions. We might go down a complete rabbit hole. That type of listening experience is great. You don't get burnt out hearing interviews like that the way that you get burnt out hearing the same 5 questions asked every single episode. Yeah. And as a podcast host, it makes it so much more fun. It might be the easy way to go at the beginning, but I can't see how people that are like in their multiple hundreds or multiple thousands of episodes, how they still do that same format without it just being because it's a source of revenue or it's a source of content creation. That to me it just comes off as lazy, and it comes off as, after a while, uninspired, and your listener lifetime is just going to dwindle, as opposed to where somebody, when you tune in every week or every day or whatever the case may be, and you have a good idea that it's going to be a valuable thing to listen to, but it's not going to be the same 5 questions you've heard asked every single day for the last 2 years. You're more likely to stick around and listen to a lot more episodes of that podcast.
I agree, but what's interesting is I think you and I might be thinking of two different shows, but they're both very well known, and we can talk about that off the air. But what about the listener? Do you think the listener appreciates knowing what questions are coming? Or, I mean, are they generating are they recycling new listeners and people are leaving a lot, or what's going on there?
I think that, and I don't want to be insulting, but I think that format appeals to very low-hanging fruit in that niche. It appeals to people who have not got very much experience, who are very green, who are very new to that niche, and going over those same 5 things or those same 10 questions and hearing different points of view on the same subject from different guests every single week or every single day. That is, when you're brand new, fresh to whatever it is, and you haven't heard the same 5 questions over and over again, and the same, what book would you recommend our listeners listen to? And you haven't heard the same book recommendations and the same inspirational quotes over and over and over again. That can be appealing. But once you're established, once you've started figuring out the answers to these questions on your own, once you've started seeing that there's a breadth of information to be absorbed that can't be encapsulated in those 5 questions or whatever the case may be, then it becomes a lot less appealing. So it depends on what listener you're going for. If you're going for the newbie to whatever niche it is listener, if you're going for the listener that doesn't have a wide breadth of knowledge on the subject, yeah, it's great. It can be very appealing to that listener. But if you're going for the people that are the actual nerds, the people that live, eat, sleep, and breathe whatever your content is, those 5 questions over and over again will just become incredibly monotonous to those listeners, and you won't be able to keep a large listener base for a long time. So that's kind of my opinion. I guess anecdotally, but as a podcaster, though, I just can't see how you could get up and drudge through the same 5 questions episode after episode. It would just drive me insane.
Right. What's your morning routine? Well, I meditate. I mean, everybody says that nowadays,
Yeah. I make sure I meditate, and then I go for a walk, and then I email my people, and it's like I do the miracle morning. I do my variation of the miracle morning. I do my variation of the miracle morning. And it's like, okay, so I know what the last answer of this podcast episode is going to be.
Yeah. See, this is great. This is why, I love podcasting. I get to talk with you, and you've kind of given me encouragement, let me know, hey, maybe I'm on the right track here, and just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. But I know there's a lot of things I could improve on and change as well. And that's for another whole show maybe. So, Nathan, so let's talk about your website, podcastblastoff.com. What can this business do for maybe a new blogger who has never done a podcast before but would like to start one, or maybe it's a seasoned blogger who's been writing great posts for years, but he's just never, or she's never stepped out and done a podcast?
Gosh. So this is where I'm going to shatter people's dreams. we actually, you and I talked for a while about potentially hosting your podcast with our service, and ultimately it wasn't the right fit for what you wanted to do. And I maybe I'm not a good greedy capitalist businessman, but I don't think our service is right for everybody. If you're an established blogger and you want to keep your URL, you want to keep your SEO juice, our service is at this point not right for you. We are working on changing that, but at the time of this recording, I would dissuade somebody from going with us and recommend alternative services. But if you're somebody who wants to start a podcast, who doesn't have, like you, Matthew, you are a great web developer, you know WordPress, you know how to put a blog website together. Our service is for podcasters that don't know how to do all of that stuff. So our service is for people that want to just publish their podcast, have their podcast files hosted somewhere, and have all of the website work done for them. That's what we do, is we offer podcast hosting and podcast website templates and hosting all in one place, so that you don't have to have an account with Libsyn and an account with WordPress and an account with Bluehost and all these different accounts. We just put it all together in one package for people. So for somebody who wants to start a podcast and wants to have all of the heavy lifting of web development and hosting and everything like that taken care of for them, that's who we're for, and just wants to focus on creating their podcast. Somebody like you, though, who's a seasoned blogger, probably would find very little value in what we provide.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the only reason why I didn't go with your service. Was really, I was just wanting a player to go on my website. So what you offer is like a website for the podcast as well.
Yeah, so it's a very exclusive niche audience that we serve, and we're working on ways to broaden that. But right now, that's who we serve best, and that's who we're most focused on serving, is people that just want to build a podcast audience and let us take care of all the web development stuff, so that they don't have to deal with that headache.
So let's talk about your two podcasts. Let's talk about your shows, Nathan. Anarchopreneur and the Copywriting Podcast with David Garfinkel.
Okay, so since I love talking about me first, we'll talk about Anarchopreneur. That's the Nathan Fraser Show, BYO Boss podcast. Basically, that's just me. It still has a little bit of political hints in it, but it's basically me just talking about marketing and lessons that I've learned throughout the different businesses that I've owned, and lessons that I'm still learning. I don't think business or business ownership or marketing or copywriting is something that you learn and then you're done. It's something that is kind of like a lifelong journey, and that's what I do on that show. Is I talk about that stuff.
Hey, before you move on, I'm still trying to figure out which title comes first. Is it BYO Boss, the Nathan Fraser Show, or Anarchopreneur?
Nathan Fraser Show is probably, that's the URL for the website, so nathanfrasershow.com.
Okay.
Anarchopreneur is kind of the branding for it, but it's too hard to spell. Most people can't even spell entrepreneur, so making it more confusing saying anarchopreneur, I've kind of moved away from that.
Okay.
So Nathan Fraser Show is what I usually tell people, but I did buy BYOBossPodcast.com, so you can also find it by typing in BYO Boss Podcast.
Okay.
And that is basically, I look at marketing and I look at group psychology, and it's basically about how human beings think, how you can persuade people, and I point out how it works in marketing, how it works in copywriting. And I also dive a lot into how it works in mass media and how it works in politics, because a lot of people, once you start learning marketing, once you start learning these psychological triggers, you start realizing that politicians and mainstream media is constantly manipulating people. And so there's just a wealth of ammunition to explore there as well, because marketing is everywhere when it comes to politics and media.
Yeah, I really enjoy your show, the Nathan Fraser Show. I like how you call yourself the high priest of propaganda. I actually am interested in propaganda myself. I know that sounds really geeky, but so you and I are kind of kindred spirits in that regard.
Nice.
I really enjoy your show there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there are links to all of these shows in the show notes, by the way. And share with us for a minute about the copywriting podcast.
So, Copywriters Podcast is a show that I produce for David Garfinkel, and he's widely known as the world's greatest copywriting coach. He's probably the most influential source that I came across when I first started copywriting. And I pestered the heck out of David for almost 8 months trying to get him to do this podcast with me, and he kept giving me the not the cold shoulder, but he was very hesitant, and I just pestered him and pestered him and pestered him, and finally he agreed to do it. And so we're almost 10 episodes in now, and it's just a wealth of knowledge for anybody that wants to know what copywriting is. Copywriting is basically salesmanship in print. It's persuasive writing. It's whenever you see a well-written, persuasive sales message, it's probably a very high-paid copywriter that put it together. And David is top-notch. He's up there with, the cream of the crop when it comes to A-list copywriters. And we get together every week and we pick a subject. Maybe it's how to write effective headlines, how to do a good call to action, how to effectively use bullet points, how to use stories in your selling to compel people. Every week we get together and we just kind of chit-chat about effective, persuasive copywriting. And so far, the show has been a huge hit. It's constantly climbing the ranks in iTunes, and the feedback has been fantastic about it. And everything that I promised David going into it that I was going to be able to accomplish for him, I was actually able to pull off. I was a little bit nervous about it, but we've been able to reach all the goals, and we're still climbing. So it's my new passion project that I'm just 100% all in for.
Fantastic. Yeah, David has a way of simplifying the whole copywriting process and breaking it down and making it really understandable. I highly recommend that new bloggers check out this show because copywriting will do so much for your website. Even if you're not monetized, if you just want to get more readers, be sure to check out the Copywriting Podcast with David Garfinkel.
And you can find that, the URL for it is the copywriterspodcast.com.
Which is in the show notes.
Awesome.
Nathan, I've kept you for an hour here, so let's get to a new part of the show that I call the Final Fun 4. These are 4 random questions just for fun.
All right.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So you were once a rapper. Do you still rap today?
I still write rap music, but like I said, my brother, that was his passion, and it's been very hard for me to get in a vocal booth ever since he passed away. So I still have a catalog of probably 30 or 40 unwritten songs that I have not recorded, but I just can't stop writing music. I'm not able to get into the studio the way I was. But I think writing music is probably one of the things that first made me realize how much I loved writing, led me into blogging, and led me into doing email and copywriting.
Yeah, and if you want to get a little sample of Nathan's rapping skills, check out the Nathan Fraser Show because you do those raps like in the transitions.
I do.
Yeah, those are pretty cool.
Thank you.
All right.
Personal branding.
Yeah. So let's get to the second question. Final Fun 4. What's your favorite podcast that's not in the marketing or podcasting tips niche?
Oh man, see, you surprised me because I was not informed of what these questions. You didn't have a page on your website telling me what the questions were going to be. I'm going to say I have two of them, and one of them is the Tom Woods Show, and the other one is the School Sucks podcast. But out of those two, if somebody was only going to listen to one of them, I would recommend the School Sucks podcast.
All right, I'll have to check out School Sucks podcast. I am almost a daily listener of Tom Woods. I usually catch most of his shows, so.
Okay, nice.
Great choice there. All right, number 3. Are you a sports fan? Are there any sports that you enjoy?
I'm not so much a sports fan. I like football. I love hockey, but it's a business, and being a business owner and realizing how you monetize things and having my suspicions about how certain aspects of all of the different professional sports are maybe pushed one direction or the other, seeing how they definitely use marketing to create superstars. And I'm suspicious about the up and up legitimacy about sports. So it's really hard to be enthused about a thing like professional sports when you're suspicious that maybe there's more going on behind the scenes than is known up front.
Very interesting. So do you think the games are actually rigged possibly, or?
I think that the refs have a lot to do with who wins games and who becomes superstars. And I think that I think it's a business, and as a business owner, I know that everything you can do to ensure that your team or your business is going to be profitable, you have kind of an obligation to do. And if that means maybe fudging the fairness of what's going on in order to garner up excitement about events, I think that I think that it's more than just professional wrestling that has a little bit of fakeness to it.
All right, fair enough. And number 4, do you think Donald Trump will run for re-election?
Oh gosh, I hope so, and not because I'm a fan of Donald Trump, but because the only thing that would prevent him from doing it would be something that would be horrific. And I'm not saying I hope he runs again and wins. I'm not very, I don't really care. I don't, again, not a big fan of him, not a big hater of him, but the alternative would mean that he would probably be no longer with us. And I think that that would be a tragedy, just because all human life is valuable, in my opinion. And so if he's still around, he probably will run, and I'm hoping that he's still around just because he's a human being, and I don't want to see something horrible happen to him. And you see a lot of stuff on the media where they kind of push for horrible things to happen to him.
Right, you are absolutely right, and that's a whole other show. So that's fair enough. All right, very good. So Nathan, where can people connect with you on social media?
On social media, you can find me on Facebook. You can just look up Nathan Fraser. And really, Facebook is the only one that I am that active on. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Look me up as Nathan Fraser on Facebook. And that's Fraser.
Very good. Absolutely. Yes, I recommend connecting with Nathan on Facebook. He does provide a lot of... I don't know if I want to call them memes, but they're really good quotes.
I max out Facebook's organic reach. If you want to follow somebody who just rocks the wheels off of Facebook, I'm definitely the guy to. And
yeah,
again,
you are.
I don't want to be the egotistical jerk, but I definitely know how to work Facebook.
You know how to work it. That's for sure. Nathan, thanks for coming on the Blog Chronicles today. This has been fun.
Thank you. It was a blast. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe on YouTube or iTunes and leave a rating or review to help other bloggers find us. If you want to chat, look me up on Twitter at Matt Loomis. Who is going to be featured next on the Blog Chronicles? She has years of experience in blogging, and her current blog is serving a very special niche. She serves parents with special needs children who are homeschooling. So if you want to find out how our next guest is building an audience and earning an income through a very specific niche, you'll want to tune in next time. I'll see you there.